Welcome to another episode of Beyond Physical, where we talk about the mental, emotional, social, and at times spiritual benefits of exercise. We believe that exercise is more than movement, and this podcast is our attempt at sharing that message with the world by sharing our own as well as our guests' experiences and knowledge. If you enjoy it, we ask that you please spread the message by leaving a rating and review, or even better, by sharing with a friend. Hello, and welcome. Today's episode is a little bit different, and it's about learning. It's not fully about learning, but I'll delve into a little bit of what I've learned, reading and studying a little bit about Sam Walton from reading Sam Walton's Made in America, which I will delve into. But first, a little bit of context about this episode. So at the end of last year, we did a goal-setting exercise with the team. And I encouraged that the team at Horizon set some goals and are nice and specific with those goals. And going into 2025, setting my goals in around November, December, I broke them down into physical, professional, educational, and relationships. So relationships are the important relationships in one's life, significant others, family, friends. Physical is literally any sort of physical goals that you have, whether it's prepping for a marathon or a run, or whether it's dropping some weight or picking up some weight, or just feeling better and moving easier, getting stronger, whatever it may be, it's those physical goals. And then professional is fairly self-explanatory. It has to do with what goals you have for yourself professionally. What do you want to do at work? What kind of impact you want to have? What are your intentions for work for the year? And what that might look and feel like. And then educational goals. And that has to do with learning. And learning is something very close to me. It's something that I've loved from a very early age. I've been a very inquisitive, curious person. It's one of our key values at Horizon. We have 4 key values: accountability, reliability, curiosity, and helpfulness. And curiosity really leans into that learning element of our values. And I think that it's something that we should all dedicate some time to, because learning and becoming a little bit enlightened really shifts the way we look at the world. It helps us get more out of our day-to-day experiences. It helps make us more valuable and helpful to people around us, and it just enables us to have a little bit more impact. And it's fun to find new things and understand novel things and learn and apply different things. So this podcast really is to lean into that educational goal. And I set a goal for myself, which is to record a podcast on every book that I read in the year 2025. And I typically read about 1 book a month, and the reason why I decided to add podcasting to that learning process is because I have a mental model around learning called RASA, and RASA is a 4-letter acronym: receive, acknowledge, share, and apply. So receive is to listen, to read, or observe. So when that information is coming in for the first time, in this case, with Sam Walton, I read and I listened to a bit. I listened to a few podcasts. Founders Podcast was my main source of information on Sam Walton and Walmart. Acknowledge. So the acknowledgement piece is to write it down, to notarize your insights, and to really just put pen to paper and try and reiterate those learnings so that you are essentially explaining the concepts to yourself. Share is very important, and explaining the concept to someone is a really good tell as to whether or not you've fully downloaded that idea and how comfortable you are with it and how much it has actually internalized. And that's what this podcast is, and that's why I added it into my goals for education, because I'm doing a lot of receiving. I'm reading a lot. I'm asking people a lot of questions. I do make notes quite frequently. That's another thing that I've been doing more of, but the sharing part is something that I feel really solidifies that information. And that's why you often find that teachers are so, they've got such a a thorough understanding of what it is that they are teaching, because they've distilled the ideas down to their fundamental elements, to their first principles, through explaining and re-explaining and re-explaining and getting questions around the explanations and refining the way that they explain. So I thought to myself, this is my learning mental model, the circle of learning, as it goes in a circle. If you can imagine in your head, receive goes to acknowledge, goes to share, goes to apply. And through that process, it kind of circles around and around, and it reinforces everything that you learn so that your understanding becomes more and more robust and comprehensive. I want to involve the beyond physical community. I want to involve you in the learning process, because knowledge is better shared, and it's fun to share it, and I think there's a lot of value in it. And then fourth is apply. So application is to implement these lessons, and the way that I've been doing that typically, because most of the stuff I read applies to either personal development, psychology, and understanding myself, I'll either apply it to my life and my day-to-day behaviors, or it will be around horizon. I read a lot of management theory, a lot of economics kinds of stuff. It's for me, it's just something that I really enjoy, and it's a bonus that it also applies to what I do every day running Horizon. So why Sam Walton? Why study Sam Walton? So I first got interested in the topic of Sam Walton through David Senra, the creator of the Founders Podcast, and he absolutely loves Sam Walton. And I think what's cool about Sam Walton is he's a real kind of fundamentals, basics kind of guy. He looks at the basics, he does the basics well. The business model that he pushed and pioneered was mass discounting in retail. And that at the time of when he started Walmart was quite novel and quite new, and it was a little bit of a land grab. And it was an opportunity that a lot of people jumped at, but he stuck at it, stuck at it, and he really refined his model over the years. And it started out as a single store. It was in fact what was called Ben Franklin, and that was an existing franchise, Ben Franklin discount stores. It wasn't even specifically discount, but it was a retailer that he owned a franchise of, and eventually opened his own Walmart store. But it was in a single store. It was a fairly underdeveloped town. If I'm remembering correctly, it was Bentonville, Arkansas, but I may be wrong, in the US. And today it is generating over $600 billion in revenue a year. And I mean, that is just a measure of scale and size. It's not to say that determines whether or not something is successful, but it does put into perspective how much that small retailer in kind of rural Southern America, the south of America, North America, the United States, how that thing has grown. And things were simple, they were repeatable, they were scalable, and that's really a form of business that resonates with me and that I enjoy, because when you get into business, I think it's important, people like Warren Buffett say, if you don't understand the thing, then don't invest in it. And I feel like the same goes for business. If you don't fully understand the business model, then either understand it or don't get into that business, because you will find, even when you do understand the model, that there are a lot of things that you weren't expecting and that you don't know, and that can really derail whatever effort you have for leaving some sort of impact. And Sam Walton was really an example of obsessing over the details, being hyper efficient, aligning incentives, and creating incentives for his team, which I love. And it's it's culture and it's leadership and scaling, aligning both the obsession to detail, efficiency, and aligning incentives with culture, leadership, and growing the business. So the first core lesson is start small and think long term. Also think small. Now that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I think that it holds a lot of value. And what is meant by starting small and thinking small is look at something that you can manage. And this applies a lot to the way that our philosophy around fitness at Horizon works. It's pick something achievable, pick something manageable, focus on that thing, improve on that thing, gain momentum in that thing, build your confidence, and work from there, and really master the fundamentals. What Walmart did was they started in very small towns. The first town that they started in was fewer than 10,000 people. Now this is micro. If you have to just think about, I mean, Cape Town, for instance, it's millions of people within Cape Town, and it's a pretty big city. It's not the biggest city, but it's still quite large. And what what the approach that Sam Walton took kind of exemplified was that if you can serve a small market well, and if you can provide a lot of value to a small group of people, you can create something incredibly impactful, and you can create something incredibly valuable. And this does align with some other business cases. If you take a look at Capitec, it's actually probably not a good example because Capitec served the mass markets, but they looked to serve underserved areas, and that's where the parallel is. And that's really where their success stemmed from. Capitec's a little bit different because they were expanding through a strategy of acquisition. They bought a series of micro lenders and over time converted them into banks. They were very, very tech focused. They looked to front the costs in terms of automation, tech, and solutions like that in order to reduce their staff overheads, so that over time they could offer very affordable banking services to people who typically wouldn't have been banked because of the socioeconomic and commercial implications of how the South African economy is geared due to our history of apartheid, leaving so many people disenfranchised and underserved by design. It was a system built to benefit the few at the expense of the many, and part of that was structuring the financial system so that there were most South Africans who weren't receiving banking services. But anyways, I digress. The key point being that looking at underserved markets and growing into those markets and making them into viable markets where you can have impact, where you are offering value, actually changes lives and actually brings about benefit. And Walmart went into these small towns with really low prices and made what was typically available to more kind of, I suppose, upper middle income earning Americans, and made it available to people living in more rural areas and farming towns and things like that, which is very impactful because it increased the standard of living, or what people could afford to have in those areas, which is amazing, and I think a key component of their success. Secondly, obsessing over the details. So everything was tracked. Walton tracked everything. And a saying that I've heard over and over again is what gets measured gets managed. And that applies to your nutrition. If you're tracking your nutrition and you're watching what you eat, you're going to manage that. If you are tracking your personal finances and what you're spending, that will get managed. And the same goes for costs and overheads within a business. Track these things, track your sales, track your foot traffic, track your inventory, track the fluctuations in when people come to the gym, or when people come to your store, or when people engage with your content or product, and track it religiously and focus on it, because the nuance of that, especially when you're small, really helps you lay the foundations for what is going to create sustainable growth and sustainable value over time. And these are just lessons from Sam Walton, where I have noticed some parallels in what we're doing at Horizon. A little anecdote around what made his tracking very apparent is that he carried a tape recorder everywhere, and he carried a legal pad with him everywhere. Now, of course, today we've got phones. Back then, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, when he was growing Walmart, there weren't such things available, so he tracked it more manually. How he stored all this information in an efficient way, who someone alone knows, but he did it. And that kind of is quite inspiring, because it shows that it is something that we can do day to day. Even if you don't have a phone, you can use a legal pad. You can carry something around you to store the little nuggets and insights that you pick up as you walk around and as you observe your surroundings, with whatever it might pertain to. It's important to really jot those things down and retain that information. Next was incentives. And incentives are, it's a topic that comes up very regularly. It's been coming up in a lot of the stuff that I'm reading, and it came through very clearly in Sam Walton's autobiography, Made in America, where, and this is something I am big on and I try to implement wherever I can within Horizon, which is profit sharing. And the reason why that is important is because tying the performance of the thing and tying the performance of the brand or whatever it may be to individual contributions from the team, I think is a fair way of compensating people first and foremost. And I think it should be that way because at the end of the day, it is the people who form part of the team that create the value. It's not a solo effort by any means. A lot of emphasis is placed on founders and CEOs and things like that, but those people are just conductors, or they're just kind of guiders of an overall effort of a collective group of individuals who all deserve to be pulled in on the growth and prosperity of an organization. And Sam Walton did this really well. And it's a way that you kind of democratize decision making, you incentivize participation, and you encourage creativity because those things are rewarded. Those are typically the things that move the needle on growing a business, on innovating, on doing cool things, on bringing new offerings and better offerings and more refined systems to your customers. And you want that to be rewarded because otherwise what is the incentive for the people you're working with to actually move the needle on that? And you want your team to feel the wins, not only by seeing the business grow, but you want them to feel it financially too, because as much as a lot of people do work to feel fulfilled, most people, I would imagine, do it to put food on the table. That's a huge part of why I work. So it's only logical to then assume that that's why a lot of other people work. I'm very fortunate that my work is largely impact and fulfillment driven, and I'm very privileged to be in that position. But and even if everyone in the team were motivated by that same thing, it's still important to tie in some sort of financial benefit. And I mean, salaries don't really constitute an incentive because they're fixed. It's like you have a job description, you have a remit, and you tick the boxes on doing those things. But whether or not you do that at 80% and get all your things done or whatever it may be, or you stretch yourself to 105% and you really drive innovation within your company, your salary doesn't typically immediately change. But if there's a way to have whatever value that you're generating within the business to translate to some immediately felt financial benefit, it's incredibly powerful. And it's something that I'm paying a lot of attention to and that I'm trying to understand as much as I can, because I think if it's something that you can incorporate sustainably, it will have really tremendous results in terms of the customer experience and in terms of team morale as well. Because words of encouragement, which Sam Walton was a big proponent for, and I am too, only take you so far. I think it's really important that there's a numerical financial incentive tied to people doing good work. And it also just drives a culture of ownership where it's like I feel very much tied to this thing doing well, and I know that as much as it is something that maybe feels close to my heart and that I'm excited to build, and I can see the impact of my work in terms of what the customers are feeling, it also needs to reflect, I think, in someone's bank account. I think that's really important. And again, going back to that element of fairness, I think it's important to pull that into compensation. And again, this is just stuff that I've learned through reading about various entrepreneurs, and in this specific case, Sam Walton. I have a very green sort of track record at this stage in terms of my actual years of experience. It's about 6 years in the fitness industry and just over 2 years running the gym business. But still, it is such a repeated lesson and principle for people who do things that make people's lives better. Is firstly tying the impact and the growth of the organization to what input the team is making as much as possible to encourage ownership and participation and creativity. Um, and then number 4 is copy and improve, and then use that to scale. So something that really shifted my perspective is to reframe how we look at the competition. So a lot of the time, and I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, because I do it in my personal capacity. Like, I'll look at somebody who has done some cool stuff in some sort of field that I'm interested in, and I'll go, wow, that's really shifted my perspective on what good looks like to me. I am going to implement X, Y, and Z, a daily practice from said person into my own life and apply that so that, I can generate some sort of outcome that is similar. And I think that's really important when it comes to competition in business. It shouldn't be a thing of antagonizing your competition. It should be a thing of constant learning and studying of your competition. See what they're doing right. What are their customers talking about that they're enjoying? What is the team at that competitor feeling like, and what do they enjoy and what don't they enjoy about the experience there, and really understanding these various elements of how your competition operates, because your competition typically occupies the same industry as you, hence them being competition. So there is a parallel between you and them, between your organization and theirs. And you can therefore assume that applying what they're doing well and avoiding what they aren't doing well, or doing better at what they aren't doing well, is going to benefit your organization, whether that's from the position of someone who's just started in a new role, or whether that is you're a manager or you're a founder or owner or whatever it may be. If you take time to go and observe and study what your competition is doing well as what they aren't doing well, and then borrowing the former and applying it to your context in your unique way, it can reap tremendous benefits. Next is to stay lean and stay scrappy. Now, this is probably the most kind of repeated lesson, and all the way back to when I first read Eric Ries's The Lean Startup. Um, I learned about things like minimum viable product, and trying to trial things at the absolute basic fundamental level before adding extra features and things like that onto your service or your product. Don't kind of develop something and then see if it needs, if it's wanted. Kind of assess what is wanted and needed, trial that thing at the basic level, and then add on based off of feedback from consumers and based off of what your clients or customers say. And it's really important to do that. It's important to avoid adding frilly bits for the sake of it. It can sometimes be annoying for the team if you're managing a team and they come with an idea and you kind of question it, and really kind of put them through their paces around where the value around it is, because you want to strike a balance between making contributions, making contributors feel like their contributions are valued, but also balancing that out with what is actually needed and necessary, and what is the return on that for the end customer? Like, how is that actually going to change the customer's experience? Is it something that the customer even wants? Go and take that suggestion. Let's say there's a new class format that's been suggested by a coach at Horizon. Firstly, it would be, how many members have spoken to you about this? How many members have requested it? What kind of members? Are these the short-term members? Or are they the long-term members? When did they bring this up to you? What is it going to cost to implement this thing? How many more people do we think would benefit from this thing? Is this something that might negatively impact our existing membership, or is it something that everyone's asking for? And really, like, hyper analyzing the details around that change before moving on it is very important, especially when you're starting something off, because you have limited resources. And again, also when you get to tremendous scale like Walmart, because a small change at the scale of what they're doing, that will cause a 1% drop or 1% increase in cost or something like that, it ends up being translating to a significant kind of resource expenditure. So really avoiding unnecessary overheads, really considering things that are going to change the cost structure, and just keeping a tight grip on that, keeping your belt tight, staying lean. And it's not about being cheap. Frugality is not about cheapness. It's about investing in what truly matters and what truly translates to value for the people that are engaging with what it is that you're offering, and truly creating value for the team um, within the business. If it's not going to have a significant ROI for either your internal team and how their day-to-day experience is and how they experience their work and their workflows, or it's not going to have a significant ROI in terms of the customer experience, it's likely something that you can pass on, at least for the time being. And what significant means will vary from company to company. It's going to be very different for Horizon, a small boutique, one location gym business in Sea Point, compared to a global retail chain like Walmart. But just being aware of that is very important. And Walmart have this policy, or at least they had at the time of writing, because this book was written a while ago, which is to keep the corporate salaries, so the kind of central office, not the people in the retail stores, but keep the corporate salaries below 2% of revenue, because it happens so quickly. And he commented on this, where you have these C-suite executives making the decisions in the company that have these exorbitant salaries, where you can try and justify it by saying, yes, well, they are steering a very large ship. So a 10% swing on a $500 billion company is $50 billion. So it's a lot. And therefore you can justify $100 million a year salary. I hear that, but it's also, I just think, sets the precedent for bloating and overcompensating, which is not necessary. And what is the point of paying someone that amount of money anyway? It's like, what can they do with that? It's I don't know. It just seems unnecessary. And I mean, Sam Walton seemed to support that, and he's definitely solidified that for me, I think. I mean, I understand both sides of the coin. However, I definitely do lean towards the frugality side of things, because frugality is sustainable. And he also spoke to something about, you can have, he posed this kind of this two-factor scenario where he was like, you can have a real tough bout and get through it and survive if you keep your costs low. And at the same time, you can be brilliant and have an excellent team and brilliant products. But if you allow for bloating and for your overheads to get out of control, you can sink yourself, no matter how amazing your business case is. And I think that is a key takeaway for me as well, which is more of a reinforced thing than a new learning. But cool to see that it's applied at that scale, and not just at a local business scale like we have at Horizon. And then something that was really powerful for me, and something that I took away, and it's something that also resonated with me reading That Will Never Work by Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix. I would highly recommend that read. It's quite a cool story of how Netflix got to where they are today. Was the emphasis on family. And Mark Randolph instituted with his wife a weekly date night that was a non-negotiable. And at the end of That Will Never Work, he referenced that his greatest success throughout the story of Netflix was not building this impactful multi-billion-dollar global company. It was doing so whilst simultaneously improving the relationship which he had with his best friend, which is his wife. And I thought that was really powerful, and that insight was really cool, because you often read about these guys and these people, these entrepreneurs who build these impactful things at the expense of their relationships. And maybe that's what makes them happy. Maybe relationships aren't a significant thing for them. But I know for me, relationships are one of the reasons why I started Horizon. Is I love connecting with different people. I love hanging out with like-minded people, and I would never want for that to come at the expense of the relationships that I have with my close people, my existing close circle, because those are the most important people in my life, and nothing's really worth that. It's like you can't quantify the value of those people in your life at all. So balancing that out being a main theme for Mark Randolph, and as I'll now bring into the conversation, Sam Walton, for me was incredibly powerful. Walton had 4 kids before 30. Couldn't be me. To each their own, but couldn't be me. And he only started building Walmart after 30. And this also debunks a bunch of stuff, which is like you can't build things whilst being a family man. But he was definitely a family man. It was one of the testimonials, or one of the kind of accounts of his life, was one of his sons and one of his associates referencing how much of a devoted family man he was. And he went about it unconventionally, but in a way that I can relate to, where he brought his kids to work. He kind of found fun ways to integrate them in his work, because he did spend a lot of time at work. He loved what he did. And I love what I do. So I can totally relate to that, wanting to be around the space because you enjoy it. And he brought them into that environment, showed them what he was doing, gave them little things to do. They ran little popcorn stands and ice cream stalls, and made them feel involved. And later on, he involved some of them in heading up things like real estate, because Walmart owns a lot of real estate. And it's a very key part of their operations, being a brick and mortar retailer. Legal, put them in board positions. Sounds like nepotism, but um, he involved them. He involved them early, and he kept them involved in the company. And my mom used to take me to work when I was little. My mom was a single mom, with me as her only child, so took me to work when she had her production company. And I was very privileged to be able to hang out in those scenarios. It's because I understood the value of hard work, and I understood why she spent so much time at work, and I could chat with some of her colleagues, and it just made life so much, you know, I felt involved, which I think is really important. And I thought that was really a very cool takeaway that was kind of that came through in the book. And he constantly referenced as well how him and his wife collaborated, the way that she advised him, the way that she supported him, and how that relationship continued to grow. And I mean, of course, not without its challenges, but it was amazing to see that was a core part of what he did, and really really exciting, and I think reassuring as well, that anyone who's looking to do something out of the ordinary, you don't have to sacrifice your important people to do that. So that was awesome. And it does heavily contrast with, for instance, what I read about Elon Musk and his relationships. But to be honest, and I'm digressing a little bit, I think Elon Musk's relationships didn't suffer as a result of his excessive work habits, because he brought his kids to work as well, but more so of kind of childhood related challenges that he faced, which Walter Isaacson speaks about in the Elon Musk book, if you have any interest in reading that. Um, but you know, I would definitely recommend the Sam Walton Made in America book. It's an awesome guideline around building something impactful, around how to structure family life and work life in alignment, and how to create a fulfilled life where you can benefit a whole bunch of people along the way, and incentivize your team and reward your team in a fair way. I think that was really cool, and I really enjoyed how that was key. I mean, look, it's an autobiography, so there's a lot of room for bias, and who's to know what kind of deviations there were from what actually was the case. I am a little bit more inclined towards reading biographies, because they typically have a slightly more objective view on the person that's being analyzed, or on the life that's being analyzed. But it's also a different perspective that you get looking at an autobiography, because it's from the horse's mouth, and it gives you a real insight into the way that person thinks. So I think, going back on the key takeaways, starting small, as in fitness, in work, and in life. Start with something that you can do sustainably, and focus on the small thing. Get the small thing right. Serve a small number of people, and grow from there. Obsess over the details. Look at every fine detail. No detail is insignificant. If it's grabbing your attention, pay it mind, pay it attention, and jump onto it. Incentives drive culture, and the importance of incentives. I think building that into the way that you assemble your team, or whatever element of your life, I think it's important that achievement and kind of hitting goals is something that is not only shared from a kind of fulfillment standpoint, but there's also some sort of payback for the people, even if they might say they don't want it. I think it is important to share in that. although it's very rare that I think someone would give you pushback on some sort of incentive. And then copy and improve. So make sure to constantly be studying those around you that you look up to. And in the case of Sam Walton, the businesses that you're in competition with, look at what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, and adjust your formats and improve your offerings based off of that. And then very, very probably most importantly from the kind of perspective of growing the business, I think, as well as the incentives, but stay lean and stay scrappy. Keep your belt tight, keep overheads under control, and make sure that you're growing sustainably and in a way that makes sense. Don't jump the gun and don't splurge. It doesn't make sense. It does get tempting when you're growing fast, but overheads need to be considered very, very, very diligently. And finally, the personal side. It's important to, when you are creating these paths for yourself, that you bring your people along with you. I had a discussion with another founder friend of mine, and he is building an AI startup, and he spoke about how he is pulling his friends into his journey and taking us along with him, and that's how he continues to really maintain those relationships, because starting something is very time consuming. I think for the first 1.5, 2 years of Horizon, so only now I'm kind of emerging from it, I have found that I've definitely struggled with balancing the sort of social side for myriad reasons, but just kind of reminding to stay in tune with that and how important those things are. And that's what it's all about eventually. These things are better off shared, so make sure to bring your close people in on it. So that is my kind of rundown on what Sam Walton said about building Walmart and some key takeaways from that book. If you have any questions about it, you're welcome to pop me a message. I hope you enjoyed the analysis, and fortunately or unfortunately for you, there will be more to come. And this is what we're about at Beyond Physical. It's not just about exercise, it's about improving your wellness holistically, and education and self-improvement is a key element of that. So it's key that we spend time on things that fulfill us from an intellectual point of view and from an education point of view. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the show, guys. We love answering specific questions. So if there's anything you want to know, leave a comment or reach out to us directly at HorizonZA on Instagram, or email us at movement@horizongym.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Seb Prentice, and this is Beyond Physical.